Hello everyone, welcome to our webinar, Secret Converting Anonymous Traffic, your biggest updated growth opportunity. Thank you so much for joining us today. Before we start, there is a Q&A button, so please play your questions there and we will be addressed then after the presentation. The chat is also there, so you can say hi to other participants and say, for example, from where we are joining us. This webinar is made possible by our partner sponsor, Adastra, ConVZ, and DevHouse, so big shout out for them. Thank you so much. And now let me introduce our speaker, our dear Karel Holub, solution consultant here in Meiro. And he will take you through the 45 minutes of great content to set you up for your success. So let's kick it off, and over you to Karel.
Thank you. And once again, good morning, everyone. Good afternoon to those joining from far away. And let's jump straight into the topic of secrets to converting anonymous traffic. Well, the first thing to say is we live in the world where there are no secrets anymore. But we will go through the topics that might help you to actually work with anonymous visits, anonymous profiles, and to personalize the communication better for this specific type of profiles. So what are really the challenges with anonymous visits? Well, with the increased focus on privacy, with regulations such as GDPR and so on, and with the so-called third-party apocalypse, which might happen, may happen, or may not happen, but it's already there and we all know it, there is huge volume of visits, especially on your website, that are not sharing any contact details, they are not logging in, they are not identifying themselves. So let's say that somewhere between 80 to 90% of website visitors are anonymous on the first visit. And now it's a bit of a tricky question to actually define what is an anonymous visit, because we are looking at basic three categories of, let's say, customer profiles or visits. There are those that are purely anonymous. We do not know almost anything about them, and we certainly don't have any contact details that we could use for follow-up personalized communication. So those are pure anonymous visits. Then we have something that we call pseudo-anonymous category of visits. Those are visits that previously shared some kind of contact details, their first-party IDs, and so on. So we already have some information about them, but on this current visit, they do not share anything about them. So they are not logging in, they are not sharing their email or anything. So we can use the information or the data that we collected previously, providing that we are able to connect that previously collected data with the current anonymous visit. And the third category is those profiles or those visits that are fully identified. And those would be users who are logging in into your company portal or login zone. So with that, let's look at the very specific category of purely anonymous visitors. So without the personalization, the anonymous visits might get mediocre customer experience because they are only facing very generic offers on your touch points, and they might leave because with generic offers, it's very difficult to actually stand apart from your competition. So there is a huge opportunity to actually provide personalization even for this category of visits, for anonymous users or visitors. So how do we actually personalize the communication without the known identification of the user? as we said previously, most visitors are not logging in or not filling any kind of information on their visits. So the traditional personalization that relies on email address, or it might rely on CRM ID or any other identification of the clients, is sort of useless in those cases, and we need to rely on different kinds of personalization. So one of the key areas will be behavior of the client or of the visit and the context of the visit. And we will focus on behavioral data and contextual data for predicting or personalizing the behavior of those visits. So with Meiro CDP, we focus on first-party collection or first-party data, and we can use that kind of data for personalization. Later on in this webinar, we will also look at even more specific group of anonymous visits, and those would be non-consent visits. So those non-consent visitors do not provide even the possibility of tracking the first-party visits or the first-party data. So we will look into those later on. How the first-party data enables the anonymous personalization. Of course, the user is still anonymous. They are not sharing any kind of contact details, but you can already collect their context and behavior. So you see that they are visiting certain pages. They might be visiting specific product categories or even specific products. You can collect the data about where they click, how deep they scroll, how much time they actually spend on the touch point. You can also calculate visit frequencies, and you can even calculate, let's say, basic RFM analysis for anonymous profiles. The first-party data collection enables to track anonymous visits on the timeline up to the point where the user decides to share some contact details or share some personal details. Usually that's the point of purchase or subscription. So using the anonymously collected data is already enough for basic personalization. And moreover, it's a very foundation of start building the user profile or customer profile from the very beginning, from their first interaction with the brand. Real-time activation capabilities. We are still in the context of having no contact details, and we need to be in that context when thinking about activations. Probably the most frequently used activation will be website personalization. And now with Meiro CDP, we can use either pop-up banners or we can use what we call native banners that are basically integral part of the website. Both types of website personalization can use the data that's been already collected for this specific profile. So let's say there are repeated visits of this anonymous profile on your website. On repeated visits, of course, you can use the behavioral data from the previous visits. So if the user was interested in particular product, or you derive from their behavior that they are price sensitive, or they are interested in, let's say, luxury products and so on, you can already use that information for personalization of all these subsequent visits. And the real-time activation examples could be, for example, personalized product or content recommendations based on the previous actions. Now, with the real-time activations, we can really stress the real-time aspect. So we are not relying only on previous visits with the timeline of, let's say, maybe days, maybe weeks, we can personalize the subsequent pages even within one session. So let's imagine that the anonymous visitor lands on your homepage, and from the homepage, they are progressing through 1, 2, 3 levels of pages. Every subsequent page can already contain personalized aspect or personalized part based on the behavior from previous pages. How is that done? Meiro CDP deploys web SDK that tracks the interactions and collects the data. Now, obviously, the tracking SDK depends also or needs to be deployed in relation to the consent policies. So it should really be deployed together with, let's say, cookie bar or any other policy that makes sure or provides a safe tracking in terms of regulations and so on. So we start collecting the data. We immediately start building the profile, although the profile is anonymous. But with the subsequent actions of the visitor on the touchpoint, we are collecting more and more data on their behavior, and we are able to analyze the behavior and based on that decide on the suitable personalization. Now, let's have a look at some specific use cases that could be used for anonymous visits. Exit intent campaigns, in this case, for cart abandoners. So we are using a use case from e-commerce, but in a very similar way, this can be adopted, for example, for form abandoners. So just imagine instead of product card, using, for example, a subscription form or insurance policy form or calculator or anything else, where there is a process of filling in the information. So we can monitor the behavior of the visitor on those data collection points, basically, and say that based on their behavior, we can decide whether they are trying to exit before finishing the conversion, before submitting the form or before hitting on the purchase now button in the cart. So the strategy would be very, very simple. We are detecting the exit intent behavior in real time, and that is usually based on monitoring the movement of mouse cursor. So either if the visitor is moving in the direction of the top part of the browser, or they are inactive for some time, for a few minutes, we can activate the personalization in a form of a pop-up banner. And based on the context of the visitor, we can display, for example, a 10% discount, or we can display different activations based on the context, saying maybe the shipping costs are reduced, maybe there is a discount, maybe there is something else. So really depending on what kind of segment or what kind of context the anonymous visitor is fitting in. So the impact is quite obvious, I think. We try to reduce the percentage of abandoned either forms or cards or whatever is the conversion point. Smart content recommendations. Now, this use case is focusing on, let's say, content providers. So it could be publishing houses, could be subscription services, and so on. And again, it's very much focusing on the behavior of the anonymous visitor on the website. So if they are browsing or reading through specific articles or specific category of the content, based on their behavior, we can be recommending the following content that they should read. And again, we can connect it together with the exit intent. And for example, when we see long inactivation or long inactivity on the website, or we see the exit intent, we can display a pop-up banner saying, oh, wait, there is one more article you could be interested in. Why don't you read it? Or why don't you leave us an email and we will remind you later on that there is a reading list based on your history. So again, you can use this not only for increasing the time spent on the website, but also for data collection. And we will talk about data collection later on. So we will get back to this. Dynamic lead capture forms. So again, it's a strategy that might help you to collect some kind of data about a client. So the visitor is engaged. We see that they are actively looking at some products, at some specific offers and so on, but they are not converting. They are not sharing any information, any data. They are not finishing any purchases. So in the real time, we can adjust the behavior of the form. We can, again, provide information about special offers and so on. So really modify the customer journey through the situation and through the context based on their previous actions. Personalized homepages and landing pages. I think this is actually one of the most straightforward cases, but we still don't see it used often and often enough, I would say. So personalization of the homepage or landing page. The returning visitors already have some history with us, and we already most probably have the data on their previous behavior. So why should we only display a generic offer to those users who already shown some propensity towards a specific product category, towards a specific offer, and so on? So use the data collected in previous visits, even if the client or the customer stays anonymous, and use that data to personalize the landing page or subsequent pages. Audience building for paid media retargeting. When we talk about anonymous profiles, I mentioned previously that one of the most important activation channels would be website personalization. But also we can use those profiles who stay anonymous for retargeting on paid media or social media and so on. So providing that we are able to collect, let's say, Facebook ID, Google ID, or any other IDs that can be used for paid ads, we can use it for retargeting on those media channels. Now, it would be quite inefficient to take every single ID and just export it and pay for the ads. So again, use the behavioral data, use the context of the anonymous visit to decide whether you actually want to export those profile details to paid ads and maybe just waste money on someone who will never convert based on their context. On the other hand, while we are building the profile and keeping the history, of course, we can use the information not only to export active profiles for paid ads, but also exclude the profiles from paid ads. So those profiles who were anonymous for some time, then they converted, maybe just exclude them from the paid ads and save some budget that is unnecessarily wasted on that kind of profiles. So if there was a quick playbook for anonymous personalization, the first thing to do is to actually start. To start even with, let's say, very minimal strategies for personalization of anonymous visits. To be able to start, you need to deploy some kind of tracking, or you need to have some kind of tracking in place and preferably some kind of tool that is able to collect the information about anonymous profiles and keep enriching that anonymous profile in time until the conversion point where the anonymous history is connected to the identified customer or to the identified profile. So from our point of view, the basic thing to do is to get Meiro CDP, deploy Meiro Web SDK on your website, and start collecting the data. Then focus on the context and behavior of the visits, and based on that, create the activations on available channels for anonymous personalization or personalized communication. That would be mainly website or paid ads or paid media. What can be extremely useful is, of course, A/B testing and continuous improvement of the entire process of collecting the data, building the profiles, building the segments, and using that data for personalized communication. Now, let's jump into very specific category of non-consent visitors. We all know that the privacy-focused or the focus on privacy leads to quite a lot of challenges in terms of tracking the behavior or even the profiles themselves. So quite a lot of users are using browsers such as Safari, Chrome, Firefox, and all of those browsers have more or less sophisticated tools for reducing the tracking of those visits. Moreover, some users are actively using additional ad blockers or blockers of the tracking. So what can we do about those? And you can actually verify it for yourself if you open your brand's website, for example, in Google Chrome, with the standard ad blockers on, and you look into the development or developers console, you will see a lot of those little red lines saying how many of your trackers were blocked by the ad blocker or by the browser itself. So that would be one part. And another part would be the visitors who are actually not providing the consent with cookies, with the tracking policies. So what can we do about those? Are they totally lost for personalized communication, or can we do something about those as well? And the good news is, of course, we can do something about those visits too. It's a lot more difficult because obviously we cannot collect as much data or basically any personal data about those visits. But we still are able to connect the contextual signals. We know the page URL that they are visiting. In some cases, we also might know the referrer. We might know the UTM parameters, although nowadays even UTM parameters might get blocked in some cases by browsers or by ad blockers. We also know device type, time of the day, maybe the city level location, and some other data pieces that might help us to create a context for the anonymous visit. What can we do about the tracking itself? Some of the events still, mind you, you need to keep in mind the consent policies and data tracking policies. So just by switching to server-side tracking doesn't mean that you can sort of bypass the cookie consent and you can track the behavior. You still should stay in the context of tracking only non-personal data. So we can implement the server-side tracking, and we can also implement tracking of the context of the visit. While we are tracking the context of the visits, we can use that data to compare the current visiting profile with our existing profiles in the database, or profiles of other clients, users, or visitors that are actually fully identified. We have their rich profile, and based on this comparison, we can establish what would be the next best action for the anonymous visit. Very simply, based on page URL, referrer, time of the day, and so on, we can look at similar profiles in our database and say, for this visit in this context, the best offer, the next best action might be this one, because on our previous experience, those actions led to the highest conversion rate. So this strategy is very often called context-weighted panels, and those context-weighted panels are, in simplified terms, just comparison groups that are comparing the current visit in real time, anonymous non-consent visit in real time, with previous visits of different profiles, and they are looking into best possible actions or best possible outcomes that will lead to conversion. So again, we are collecting the context in real time: page URL, source of the visit, device that they are using, time of the day. And, and based on this information, we will compare this visit to similar profiles that we already have in the database. And we can use that information for personalization of, for example, the website. Probably only the website, because that's the only touch point that would be relevant to those anonymous non-consent visits. So the example that we have here is the visitor is on their mobile device. They are browsing a specific category. So they are on a page with a specific URL. We know that they came to the landing page from Instagram ad, and they are browsing in the evening. Based on comparison to similar profiles, the system will decide that they are comparable with the panel of sport fitness shopper. They are probably price sensitive. That would be based on the Instagram ad. And they are probably quick decision makers. So we will display a personalized offer: top rated running shoes, free shipping tonight. Is that offer really personalized? Not really, because we don't have any personal data. Still, it's probably a lot more relevant than a generic offer, because it takes the context of the visit into account. So those were very specific category of anonymous non-consent visits on our website. Now, let's have a look at another part of those processes, that would be zero-party data and the collection of the data. How does actually zero-party data help us with the anonymous profiles? Zero-party data does not necessarily need to focus on identification of the visitor, so it may not help you to identify the visitor, but it helps you to enrich their profile. So in this example that we have on the screenshot, we are providing some value to the visitor in exchange for their email address and name. That would be direct identification of the client, but it doesn't necessarily need to be this case all the time. And we will see further examples of zero-party data collections. So why does it actually matter? If used properly, it's 100% consented and privacy-friendly collection or way of collecting the data. So it's data that will hugely contribute to personalization, and it might actually help you to build engagement between the brand and the visitor. because it really shows that you are interested in your visitors, in your clients, and that you actively use the data that they are willing to share to improve their customer experience, while they still may remain anonymous. So zero-party data acquisitions for anonymous visitors. On this screenshot, I have taken an example of zero-party data collection without actually the necessity of identification of the client. So let's imagine that you are shopping for new running shoes, and as the brand is really interested in helping you out in the selection, they would ask about preferences, shoe size, and maybe even shoe width to make the offer really personalized and really relevant to your context. So in our experience, visitors are quite willing to share this kind of information, this kind of data, because it's not directly related to their identification, to their email address, and so on. So they are less suspicious of getting some kind of marketing or spam content in their inbox, and they are willing to share this kind of information, especially on websites where there is like huge quantity of products. Some visitors will actually find this kind of selector useful, as they are suffering from selection paralysis. So this will really help them to find the right product for them. And it helps you to build higher quality profiles. What would be the best practices for zero-party data collections? The zero-party data collection, I would say the very first rule or best practice is do not be creepy. Please do not be creepy, right? We really want to make the customer experience easier for the visitors, not to be like straight in their face with some kind of pop-ups and all those intrusive activations that are so obvious that they are collecting data. So make it really clear that there is something that you offer in exchange for their sharing of their preferences or sharing of their data. So offer something in exchange. And it can be a very simple thing. It can be just, we help you to decide. That is already some value that you provide. It needs to be really unintrusive. It needs to be really simple and easy to finish. So 2 to 4 clicks, probably no typing. If you already force them into typing their name or email address, you will not get that many conversions on those activations. And use it immediately. So if you are collecting data on one visit and you only show them some kind of personalization on their next visit, it's probably useless. Real life examples from anonymous to engaged profiles. And I have described a little bit that kind of use case previously. So the visitor lands on your website anonymously. You try to engage them in some kind of activation. So for example, this quiz on finding the perfect shoe for them. They will select some attributes, and then immediately you can personalize the product list that you will show to them, or you can offer, let's say, a blog article that will help them with their choice, and so on. So be creative, don't be creepy, and use it for immediate personalization. Now, let's look at some bonus strategies that can be used with anonymous profiles, anonymous visits, to get better activation and to provide better customer experience for them. So even without identities, we are able to use quite a lot of activations, quite a lot of strategies, and I will share additional 6 strategies with you today. So, smarter ad spend. We have touched upon the paid media previously, and as I mentioned before, focus not only on what profiles you can collect and what profiles you can actually export for paid media, but also exclusion segments are extremely important. And you can see that some anonymous visitors, even though you are collecting their profiles for paid media, are not really worth it for the spend of the paid media budget. So even repeated visits you can derive from their context and from their behavior, they are very unlikely to convert. They are very unlikely to actually respond to paid media. So just exclude them. Or, as I said previously, those who already purchased, then you don't need to export them again for retargeting and save the budget for those with higher potential. Progressive micro conversions. Those micro conversions are usually related to zero-party data collection or those personalized customer journeys. So even small things that the clients are willing to share about them helps you to build enriched profiles. So even actions such as downloading a PDF guide or responding to a blog post or leaving a comment, that can be something that you can use to build better profiles, and you can use it for subsequent personalization of their next visits, although they stay anonymous. Adding products to wish list or starting a product configurator. All those are data points that help you to resize the profiles and make the follow-up actions or follow-up visits more personalized. Gamify or gamification. That can be a lot of fun for some of your visitors if you are able to design nice gamification on your touchpoints, on your website. And it also helps you to collect the preferences or, let's say, behavioral signals. And it can help you to, again, build more specific profiles. On this screenshot, I'm using actually a selection of cameras, and camera is actually one of those types of products that can be highly tribal. How do you use tribalism for gamification? Well, you can use some kind of like fun quiz saying, why is Canon 10 times better than Nikon or than Panasonic or Sony, right? And you would probably be surprised how many people are willing to take that kind of quiz and share basically their preferences just for the fun and for being, the zealots or the fans of Canon or Nikon or any other brand. And the same goes for sport goods like running shoes or fashion or anything else. So use that kind of aspect for better gamification to gather the preferences and build better profiles. Now, one strategy that can be used when you have a real-time collection of the data and access to that data in real time for personalization would be session-based actions. It doesn't necessarily need to be only the loyalty focus. So once you focus on the session, you can personalize the follow-up actions still in one session. So let's say that you have highly engaged user who is really going through all the products within the category, really reading the reviews of the other users, going through the configurations and so on, you can immediately use it to either provide a personalized offer or to actually provide additional help with the decision process, especially with like complex products. Cars, let's imagine that the visitor is anonymous and it's browsing different kinds of a car on your website, and they are looking into different engine sizes and different types of interior and so on. And instead of just leaving them on their website and getting lost, you can use that information to display a pop-up saying, just leave us your phone number. Our, customer service agent will call you back in a minute and they will help you immediately with the selection process or any strategy like this one. Adaptive call to actions based on the behavior of the client. So you can use website personalization in real time to actually show different call to action buttons or links or offers on the website based on the behavior and based on the context of the anonymous visitor. So when we see that the visitor is anonymous, they are on the website for the first time, we can show a call to action saying, discover our bestsellers. When it's a engaged visitor, they are visiting the website for multiple times. We see that they are browsing deep into products and so on. We can show them limited time offers to increase the urgency of the purchase. When it's a returning visitor, we can help them to actually continue where they left off. That can be especially useful if it's related or connected with the previously mentioned use cases, such as cart abandonment, form abandonment, configuration process abandonment, and so on. So really customize their session based on the previous ones. Anonymous session stitching, and I think this is our last bonus strategy or process that you can use. It's really focusing on recognizing the returning visitors. So even if they stay anonymous through multiple visits, we stitch the sessions together and we build the profile that gets more detailed and richer and richer. Instead of relying just on one session, you are able to connect all the session of this anonymous visitor together and get much better profile, much better context. And that's it. That's all I have prepared for today for the use cases and strategies on anonymous visits and their activation. I very much hope it was useful and you will be able to take some takeaways from this presentation and use it in your everyday life. And I'll be happy to answer any questions if we have some at this point. Okay, let me check the chat. And I don't see any questions. So it seems that it was all clear. Hopefully you get the value out of this webinar. And thanks to our partners who made this webinar possible. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing you and talking to you on our next one. Thanks, everyone, and have a great day.